Split decision for the country. I'm joined by Admiral James Stavridis. Now, I did not have the Admiral on for the last month because we're just doing politics, and he's a military guy, retired. He tries to stay out of the political fray. Good morning, Admiral. How are you?
Great to see you, Hugh. What a night in America.
It is. You're talking like you were doing a lot of talking last night, were you?
I did a fair amount of media. And by the way, I want to say for those who are listening on radio, look at what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a white shirt, a red tie, and a blue coat, red, white, and blue. Let's try and think that way as we watch this slow motion gunfight that's going to go for the next 2 to 3 days.
And if people are looking at me, I'm wearing the Ohio State sweater because we still beat Penn State. That's the good news. No matter how long this goes on, Ohio beat Penn State, but we're depending upon Michigan, which makes every Buckeye feel bad. Admiral, it does look like a split decision when you look at the country as a whole. It doesn't matter who's going to be president. We're going to have divided government. What's that mean to you?
Well, first of all, can I just say something off the top? Let's all take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath and let the process play out. Let's count the votes. Every vote is sacred that was postmarked before the election or punched into a polling place. Let's count them. Then we can evaluate, and then we have all kinds of institutions that can look at this. But please, let's all just take a deep breath. Let's stay out of the streets, out of arguments. None of that is going to help us. You know, Churchill said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Exactly. And it's that kind of morning. And I think we ought to, in a kind of a backhanded way, we ought to celebrate the fact that we get to live in a democracy. We have hard-fought contests. We have institutions that'll adjudicate them, I believe, fairly. And all of that is good. I'll close on this, Hugh, because I think the thrust of your question is, what about the rest of the world? How do they see this?
Yes.
And let's be honest. They're doing high fives in the Kremlin. They're doing high fives in Beijing. They are thrilled to see this in North Korea, in Iran, in Caracas, in Havana, not because they support or not support Donald Trump. They're doing high fives because they perceive this division, this sort of violent confrontation here. We have to rise above that. Otherwise, they will miscalculate, and we could be in for a very bumpy international scene.
Well, you know, the one thing I'm confident about, if the president does not secure Michigan and Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania and win, I believe the transition will be seamless, and I believe it will go forward without a great deal of consternation. I don't think we'll have a repeat of what happened to him. I don't think he'll get blitzed by the intel officials. But I do know they're going to fight to the end. This is not, no one's going to say, hey, you won. You know, it's Joe Biden and Donald Trump are not going to concede nicely. They're going to go not gently into the night, either of them. In the course of that, I think we are greatly lucky that the Senate is not in doubt. And I don't think the Senate is in doubt, Admiral. So that means, because Nancy Pelosi is most definitely going to be Speaker again, or she might not be. It's going to be a Democratic House. She may have to step aside to a younger face. But that means divided government. What does divided government mean for the armed services?
Well, first of all, let's just hit pause for 1 second and recognize that even as we are frustrated and upset and we're tired because we were up all night, let's recognize that there are tens of thousands of young Americans, men and women, volunteers all, who are walking the dusty streets of Kandahar, who are flying high-performance jets over the Bering Strait, who are sailing destroyers under Chinese missiles in the South China Sea. Those are people who are tired, have real worries, and here's my point. They are thinking about what's in front of them. They're thinking about their mission. They're thinking about defending the country. And, you know, Hugh, there are very few things in life that I would absolutely bet my life on. But one of them is that your U.S. military will stay apolitical, will stay out of this contest, will think of this as background noise behind them somewhere. They'll stay focused on the mission. I hope our opponents realize that, and again, don't miscalculate this moment of some drama here in America for a moment of weakness by the United States of America.
You know, Admiral, I don't think that's going to happen because we've been here and done this before in 2000, and we've been here and done this in close elections before. It's marvelously intricate. and I don't know any form. You spent so much time abroad. Have you ever tried to explain the Electoral College to a colleague in Turkey or something like that? It must just be, prime ministerial parliamentary systems don't work this way. We have a very unusual system. And to explain to them how the suburbs of Detroit and the inner city of Detroit is going to decide the presidency is a little bit difficult to get across, isn't it?
It is. And, the two hardest things to explain to non-US citizens when you're living abroad, number one is what you just articulated, how you can win more votes and still not win the election. That just makes people's heads explode. And the other thing is our healthcare system, which, again, most other countries just don't get it on this kind of patchwork of healthcare that we've constructed. I think there's a point here, which is, as this 21st century unspools, I think it's worth looking at both of those things to think about, is this the right system for the United States? Let's park healthcare. But Electoral College versus popular vote, at the end of the day, I'm for it. I think that it was.
Whew, that was the right answer, Admiral. Or we're going to have it. We were going to have quite the conversation. Whoa, Nelly! The reason all these flyover states matter is because of the Electoral College,
Correct.
right?
And let's face it, it's grounded historically. Again, this is the genius of the founders, not to create a system by which there can be the tyranny of the majority. There has to be a way for the minority to express views through elected officials. That's called the Electoral College. I believe in it.
Now, Admiral, I got the toughest question for you. If you were a commander of NATO or Southern Command, which you've both done before, and you consistently received intelligence that was as bad as the polling was, because there is a real world effect when every poll says Wisconsin's a double-digit loss for the president and it's 13,000 votes right now, that's a failure of a profession. And that failure was repeated again and again, and that has real world consequences. What is your advice? I mean, if you were going to take over a network, if you were going to run, I just would fire them all, except the Trafalgar Group, which is they would all, if they were intel officers giving you intel, what would you think of their reputation?
Well, here I'm tempted to quote Shakespeare about lawyers. The famous line, "The first thing we do will kill all the lawyers." I think the first thing that happens after this, we're going to kill all the pollsters. In seriousness, they tried, I think, very hard to adjust for what they learned in 2016, and they failed miserably. And I think that if they were intel officers, they would be fired, and we would simply blow up that J2, what we call the intel structure in a military command, would call for a new commander, would call for new troops. It's quite extraordinary. And at this point, by the way, the only good news, Hugh, is that I think all of us as voters have learned now painfully over these two cycles that it is beyond an imperfect science, and it can lead you down very imperfect paths if you're a campaign strategist or you're a voter around the kitchen table. And so all of us ought to take away from this that polling is not just imperfect, it's clearly deeply flawed.
Deeply flawed. Last thing on defense budgets. One of the reasons I voted for Trump is I wanted judges. We've got a good bench, and I wanted a Republican Senate to control that. And so we're going to have a block in the Senate against crazy judges. I think Mitch will stand there all day and not confirm them. But defense spending is different. Chris Smith, who's ranking member of the House Defense Appropriations Committee, said it's not going to be terrible. With Mitch McConnell and Senator Inhofe on top of defense, it's not going to be terrible either. Will we get to some resolution on the NDA? Do you think we'll continue towards the Navy that has been laid out by Secretary Esper?
I think the Navy, yes. That has bipartisan support for all kinds of different good reasons. My sense is that in a Trump administration, defense might get a very slight plus up, and in a Biden administration, it'll be flat or a very slight decline. The key is shifting resources within that $700 billion budget to cybersecurity, to special forces, to intelligence, read our previous conversation, to space, and as you and I have talked about, to increase the number of ships, because our ships are going to be on the front lines in this great power competition that's going to unfold in front of our eyes.
Good to see you back, Admiral. Thank you for joining me early after an all-nighter. I appreciate it. Follow him on Twitter at Stavridis J. And thank you for joining me on. He looked good. He looked like he'd shaved. He's ahead of me. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt